And here we go, part 3 of emotion and relationships. How do you think this conversation's going? Probably not so well. A couple things when we're kind of in the heat of the moment. Finger pointing is really, really bad. And this goes along with the word you. You. If I'm coming at someone like that, what can I expect? They're going to freaking become defensive, right? We're not going to get anywhere, right? So a little more on that as we move here. So let's think about the terms of assertiveness versus aggressiveness. Aggressiveness is almost always defined as the intent to do harm, right? And aggression tends to cause aggressive responses. So when we employ aggressiveness, we can expect that we will see defensiveness at a minimum, or initiate aggressiveness in our partner. It's often evidence of emotional process that's gone too far. The emotions are no longer in check, they're kind of running wild, the affect intensity is on the increase, and the prefrontal cortex and the inhibition and the perspective taking and the cost-benefit analysis are all kind of taking a break. So, and that's often that affective stream going high is going to interfere with processing in the prefrontal cortex. Notice also that if people become so defensive within the middle of an argument, we can go back to the work of the amygdala, and we can look at freeze, fight, or flight, right, as the options, and originating out of the HPA axis. As we revisit those ideas, and remember, you guys, that the projections from the amygdala, that is, if I'm experiencing fear within the context of this relationship, or it's turning into aggression, the projections are going out to many parts of the brain. But the parts of the brain that could rescue us, that could kind of tamp down the efforts of the amygdala, there's not many projections going backward, so it's not a very even bi-directional relationship. The amygdala has a lot more power than the parts of the brain that might suppress its activities. Now, assertiveness, on the other hand, is making one's self-state known to another in a non-threatening manner. So you don't want to blame if you're going to be assertive. Blame is not something you do, right? And notice when you say you, anytime in a relationship you start a negative kind of communication with you, expect the other person to go on the defensive. You, and then you make me, means I no longer own my feelings, that you are responsible for creating my feelings, and you're the reason that we're fucked up now, right? Because you, and it goes along. Remember, the finger pointing is that kind of thing. So I feel sad when this occurs, puts the responsibility on me. You make me sad, puts the responsibility on the other person. So it requires taking personal responsibility to use the I statements and craft them in a non-threatening, communicative manner. How's Penelope doing? How's Penelope? Yeah. Hi, Penelope. All right, so requires assessment of the situational influences as well as disposition. Remember, disposition, when we talk about attributions, and I didn't say this, so I better say it now, dispositional attributions are the non-conscious, or typically the automatic. Situational attributions usually require more cognitive effort, are consciously generated. So often we go dispositional first, and then we edit that attribution with situational information, if we are so inclined, if we so care, and if we want to expend the cognitive effort. So becoming an assertive communicator requires some work, and here's 5 skills of assertiveness. This is by Jonas Webb, and she's a clinical PhD. She's got a really nice blog, Psych Central, and I think it's worth checking out because there's a lot of good, common sense, sensible advice supported by, in large part, empirical research. And where empirical research might be running a little shy, the people on this blog tend to be clinicians, and they have at least good clinical, anecdotal kind of support for their findings. So, 5 skills of assertiveness. Being aware that you're feeling of what you're feeling in the middle of a difficult, possibly intense situation. take a moment, take a breath, understand what those feelings are, and process those feelings kind of in as objective a fashion as you can. That is, think about it. You can have emotions running, but you can also have cognitions, and you can also do kind of the meta thing and the metacognition and think about your feelings, what their sources are, what the consequences might be, etc. Trusting that your feelings and ideas are valid and worthy of expression. I'm not saying don't diminish your feelings, don't suppress your feelings, but you're going to communicate your feelings in a way that's successful in enhancing the relationship. Managing your feelings, possibly hurt or anger, combined into any possible number of feelings and putting them into words, so express them, make them real. We saw from Pennebaker, and notice it's kind of review time in the course as we're in the module 8.3, that the emotional disclosure paradigm often will allow for better mental and physical health. Understand the other person or people involved, imagining how it's likely they feel and why, because my goal is to not hurt this person, I hope, by expressing my feelings. My goal is ultimately to express my feelings so they better understand me, so that overall we enhance our relationship, if that's the goal. Now, notice, some relationships maybe don't need to be enhanced. Some relationships, and I mean it's sad news, but some relationships maybe shouldn't go on, right? So I'm not saying that every relationship requires this kind of effort if it's something you've decided in contemplation and reflection that maybe it's not the best thing in the world. And take into account the situation and the setting when you're going to do this communication. There's a time and a place for almost everything, and often we choose a time to have this conversation which isn't amenable to our partner. Maybe they're distracted, maybe they're angry, maybe time out is a necessary component. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know, we need to make an appointment to talk about this when we both have cooled off a little bit, right? And a little patience can be put to the fore. Things that we try to settle in the heat of the moment and immediately is often not going to go well. It's just going to make it worse. Right? So how do we build our assertiveness skills? Well, pay more attention to your feelings. Pay attention to your feelings all the time, right? Make friends with your emotions. When you value your feelings, they'll become your most valuable life tool. Emotions are for doing, and emotions are to express our state. They'll tell you when you need to speak or take a stand. They'll motivate and energize you when you need it the most. So become the friend of your emotions, right? And attempt not to be the victim of one's emotions. Right, Penelope? Begin to build your emotion management skill, increase your emotional vocabulary, and we've had a couple exercises in class where we've talked about that, creating new emotions, but I don't know that that's necessary. I think what we really need to do, though, is, this is not going to go well, is it, Penelope? Okay. I thought she was going to climb on my back, and that's going to be claws in the back in short order. Right, but become more facile with your emotion vocabulary. Understand the difference. Can you define the difference between envy and jealousy? Because they are two very different emotional states. Do you know how they arise? And can you then talk about the difference? Take the opportunity to stand up for yourself as best you can, right? If you miss a chance, review it afterwards. You know, sometimes we fail in our opportunity and we kind of just got to sit there and take it, right? But learn from it. The more often you do this, the more you're going to learn. Boy, you know, I shoulda, coulda, woulda said, but then think about how you might do it differently in the future. Don't just say, oh, damn it, I blew it, I should have said this. Think about, I should have said this, and how could I have created the opportunity, or how could I have remembered, or how could I have better engineered the situation so that I would have done that, or I would have been able to do that. Right? The more you learn, the easier assertiveness will become for you. It's just something that you need to practice. Okay? Oh, I also want to mention just one more kind of shout out to Jonas Webb. Is one of the places that she likes to work, and I don't know what to say about this, but I think it's important for us to maybe explore the idea, is she's very big in childhood emotional neglect. The acronym is CEN. and how often, and there's a lot of theories to support these ideas, that what has happened to us in our childhood, the attachments that we form in childhood, the way we're treated in childhood, the way we learn about emotions in childhood, then reflect kind of lifelong skill sets, lifelong deficits, and preferences for reactions. Let us then move forward here. We'll talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. There's a lot of argument that emotional intelligence is perhaps more important than cognitive intelligence. Emotional intelligence in the workplace might be one example of that. The big question then, as we move into an idea of emotional intelligence, is how much control do we have over our emotions? Right? And although emotional responses are not always consciously regulated, we can learn to control them for the most part. So that this is part of our skill set. In this case, we have kind of an interaction, and you can see it's pretty easy to read. Yeah, we got a lot of cats, and it's, oh, sweetie, it's pretty easy to read what they're thinking or doing once you get experienced with them, with cats. The same is true for people. Over time, if we carefully observe, right, we can kind of get an idea of when we should speak, when we shouldn't, when we might talk about an issue, when we need to keep it light. This is all part of being able to read other people, right? You want to push the button? Here, you push the button. Okay, but we're going to go back. So you can see Boots and Alice. This is on the dining room table. My wife and I don't eat at the dining room table. The cats eat on the dining room table. We probably are like most people. We eat in the family room in front of the TV or computer. Take your pick. But in this case, Boots is making it clear to Alice that I don't want you around me. And Alice, notice, Boots has got a relatively aggressive posture. She's hunched down, her back's up. She's showing her teeth, except Boots doesn't have any teeth because almost all her teeth have been gotten rotten during her lifetime and have been extracted. She has one tooth. And then Alice is like, yeah, okay, I'm out of here. She's got her ears back. She's assuming a smaller posture, and she's moving away. Alice is smart. Boots is probably the dominant female in the house at this point in time. Probably. I think Cracker was the dominant female prior to Boots, perhaps. Cracker passed away in December, so it's been interesting watching the dynamic of the cats now and who's going to ascend. Interesting about cats, I also read a research article that they called it temporospatio dominance. That is, dominance hierarchies in cats are often defined by the time, maybe time of day, time of the era, so to speak, and also the location, the space. So where a cat might be dominant on the first floor, when they come up to the third floor, it might be another cat that kind of assumes dominance. So that's how they work that shit out. They have to be emotionally intelligent or they don't survive too well. Right, sweetie? Yeah. Now, let's talk about developing emotional intelligence. And many of you wrote the paper on emotional intelligence, so you got a leg up on this. So I'm probably going to tell you little that's new in your study of these ideas. So developing emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and control emotions in ourselves and others. Right? I love this quote from Buddha. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You can reflect on that for a minute. Bless you, sweetie. Yes, it's allergy season, isn't it? Yeah. Pollen everywhere. So, emotional control can be achieved by learning, and that's one of the main premises of emotional intelligence. Emotional detection can also be improved through learning, and this is how we observe others. We observe what's occurred before, the antecedent condition. We observe their response, and then we observe the consequence of that response. And those of you who consider yourself people watchers, this can be an important aspect. Okay, and let's go on. I want to show this little video. This is from an ancient TV show called The Honeymooners. Jackie Gleason was a comedian, entertainer, had a variety show, and through that variety show they developed this kind of mini sitcom module called The Honeymooners. In this, Jackie Gleason plays the part of Ralph Cramden, who is a bus driver. His wife Alice, and then Trixie and Norton are the neighbors. Norton is a sewer worker, and Trixie is a housewife just as Alice is. They live in a very meager apartment, very low wage kind of occupations. Now Ralph has a history of being somewhat overreactive, right? But to help control his emotions and not be so overreactive, he's developed a new philosophy, pins and needles. So I think we need to look at how this works as an example of emotional intelligence.
I got the greatest cure for aggravation that was ever invented. It'll only take a minute, it might change your entire life. Now look, if you ever get nervous, see, and you're aggravated, all you have to do is say, pins and needles, needles and pins, it's a happy man that grins. Then you put on a big smile, and you say to yourself, what am I mad about? And believe me, you won't be able to remember what you're mad about. I just wish I had something to aggravate me right now to show you how it works. Hey, Ralph, maybe just a little trick. All right, a little test. Pins and needles, needles and pins. It's a happy man that grins. Look, see, boy, it's working like a charm. Look at the light spot. I'm light. Good. Now, what am I mad about? They raised the rent 15%. Pins and needles, needles and pins. It's a happy man that grins. Yeah, now, Mr. Johnson, there's a perfect example how this pins and needles thing works. He fought a battle with himself, he fought this battle, and he won the battle. Now he's going to go in there for a few seconds, and he'll think it over, get calm, cool, collected. Then a couple of seconds, he's going to come out here, refreshed, with a new look out on life. Now, what do you see now? 1, 2. You are not going to get a dime. Not one thin dime are you going to get. Here's the needle. Shut up. You've got some trust in us. Some of us coming up here trying to raise our rent. You should be lowering our rent. Mr. Crandon, the rent commission just didn't give me this. I had to prove hardship. Prove hardship? What did you use for evidence? A picture of this stuff?
And so it is. You might be exposed to a lot of kind of short-term, self-helpy kind of solutions. I don't know that pins and needles is necessarily a great approach. Ralph, portrayed in this character, Ralph Cramden, has had an anger problem throughout this show, obviously then throughout his life most likely, and I think it's going to need a little more work than a simple technique. So if we're looking for simple techniques, I don't think they're going to work. We need kind of long-term, incrementally challenging ways to move ourselves forward in the direction that we want to go. Regardless, pins and needles, needles and pins. Well, oops. Let's talk about emotional intelligence, and I want to talk about one of the guys who wrote the book. A lot of the research is attributed to Meyer and Solovey. Daniel Goleman is another at the forefront in the understanding of emotional intelligence. Penelope's back. So, 4 skill areas to emotional intelligence. Break it down. Personal competence. And those of you who did the paper on emotional intelligence, remember, part of your task in that paper was to go out and find a test and then vet that test. Was it empirically supported? Where did it come from? And all those details about it. So I really sent you off on kind of not a scavenger hunt. You know, not a scavenger hunt. Let's call it a treasure hunt. Because what you learned about emotional intelligence, if you apply it to yourself, can really enhance your life and the life of all the people around you. So to be emotionally intelligent, according to Goleman, and he has developed a test, right, that measures these 4 sub-units of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness. To what extent are you aware of your own emotions, and to what extent do you have naive theories about what those emotions mean to you, your behavior, your perceptions? So that's the personal competence. Now, from personal competence, once we become competent in reading our emotions, understand what might activate these emotions, understand what the consequence of experiencing these emotions and behaving in concordance with the emotions, then to what extent can we manage those emotions? So we might control reactions. We learn to control the reactions. Boy, I'm pissed off, but I'm not going to blow up. And when we're super effective, we're also going to gain control over the display of the reactions. So some people are very skilled at doing the poker face kind of thing, that is, suppressing emotions, and we know how Ekman feels about that. And our previous conversation about micro expressions. Now, social competence then, let's build this up, is other awareness, and this is knowing how emotions affect other people. Especially within a relationship, we might be talking about our partners. We say, oh my God, this is sure going to set my partner off. Oh my God, you know, that we have this awareness of triggers in our partners that can lead to either good or bad emotions. God, I really want to cheer my partner up, so I should do this for them. Right? So it could be positive or negative. So the other awareness, empathy versus knowing. Empathy is actually feeling it internally on behalf of the other person. Knowing is good too. I mean, it's just knowing how it works. So, social competence then, the fourth component of emotional intelligence is relationship management. And this one